Thank you for that very kind introduction and for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I always get excited anytime I come back to work with a student group, especially when I start hearing things that remind me of when I was in high school. I mean, I don't expect to come to an event and actually hear the song Man in the Mirror. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, you know that song? You know who's saying? And they're like, yeah, I know saying Michael Jackson. I'm like, wow, it's incredible. And then to actually see some of the other things going on. And so it takes me back. And of course, as you get older, you like to go back to when you had hair and you had less weight and those kind of things. And so I thought back to my days when I was in high school. And I love the energy that's a part of any FFA group. And it reminds me of my high school days because I had a lot of energy and our school had a lot of spirit, if you will. And it was always interesting, though, how we had to channel that into some unique places. I'm going to talk about failure tonight. And if there was one thing that was true about the high school I attended, is that when it came to the sports program, we were failures. We weren't good. And so I made it even worse. I was not even an athlete, but I was one of those people who would sit in the stands and I would taunt the opposing players, as they'd go up and down the court. And we had a whole group of people that would gather and do that. And we enjoyed that. I mean, we made fun out of failure, if you will. And so when the score was in the basketball game was like 94-2 or something like that, then I would always, kind of get my friends excited to say, hey, let's sing our song. Let's do our chant. And they'd like, are you sure? Yeah, they'll hate it. So we would look out and we would pick out one particular player on the other team and we'd look at them and say, U-G-L-Y, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly. Hey, you ugly. And so we just, every time that person would get the ball or something, we'd start that chant. It made them so angry, and we loved it. Because, we might lose the game, but we were going to win the war of words. And what was funny was the one year that a school picked up on what we were doing and said, well, there's a second verse to that song. And so after we would do our little chant, U-G-L-Y, then this other group on the visiting side would stand up and say, hey, what do you say? We know how you got that way, your mama. Hey, your mama. And so thank you for taking me back this evening to my high school days. Now, to be serious for a moment, or as serious as I guess I could possibly get in our time together, what an honor to be a part of the opening session of this state convention as you celebrate your breakthrough moments for this past year, the things that you've accomplished as a team, as an individual, as a chapter. And I'm amazed at what I've already seen both tonight and earlier today as I've worked with some of you in workshops, and just your energy and your enthusiasm to break through, to do better, to accomplish what's important to you. However, I'm also smart enough to know that while we're all excited now, and that includes me, because you always re-energize me anytime with FFA members, is that when you go back to your chapters, when you go back to the communities from which you came from, it's easy to start getting a little bit discouraged. When you're here, everybody's excited about the FFA and the possibilities and the opportunities. But then when you return home, not as many people are. I mean, you're going to go back and talk about, we saw this amazing Vespers, and you should have seen what the state officers were doing and all these things that were happening. And some of your chapter members are going to look at you, and they're not going to say it to you, but they're going to look at you and they're going to go, you've obviously mistaken me for someone who cares. Okay? Because not other people are as excited as you are. And then you can start getting concerned about, well, is it really that good? Can I really do those things? And then what I think sets in is one of the biggest limitations to an individual's success, and that is the fear of failure. The fear of not being successful at something. Because while you see the individuals who will come across the stage this week, and you go, wow, they're winners. Well, I'm not up there, so I must be a loser. Or I don't know if I can do what they can. That it's easy to begin to doubt your own worth, your own abilities, because we don't celebrate failure real well as a society. Oh, we do when we have young children. As a dad of two girls, I know when my children were very young, the least little thing they did, like, whoa, yeah, you go. If they fell down and they didn't cry, oh, you didn't cry. That's what we do as parents. But as we get older, then the fear of failure becomes so much more real. And it's an obstacle to our success. So in my comments tonight, what I'd like to offer you is some thoughts about how do you move beyond that fear of failure? What is it about failure we need to remember that can help us to break through those barriers, whether they be FFA-related, life-related, relationship-related, or whatever? The first thing I think we have to remember is that fear of failure is a wonderful motivator. Fear of failure is a wonderful motivator. If you don't believe me, let me ask you this question. In fact, if I could I get a few house lights? Is that possible? That somebody could pull up a few house lights for me here in just a moment? There you are. Wonderful. Let's keep it right there. I'm curious, how many of you in here remember your first kiss? Raise your hand. Now, being kissed by your mama don't count, okay? All right, so I see several of you. All right, put your hands down. I know some of you still waiting. I got it. I will never, ever forget my first kiss. I was a sophomore in high school in 1980. And I was the statistician for the girls' volleyball team. As you can look at me and tell, he ain't no athlete, okay? And so I was the statistician for the girls' volleyball team, which meant I just kind of kept up with, how the game went, how many they bumped past the spikes, and all that kind of stuff. Well, it was an away game, and so as always, I was on the bus with the team, and the coach was driving, and the event was over, the match was over. We were getting back on the bus, and as I normally did, I started heading towards about the middle of the bus where some of the other girls were sitting, because, hey, I'm not stupid, okay? And so as I started heading towards the middle of the bus, some of the girls were like, no, Jones, you sit up front. I was a sophomore, and there were some girls who were seniors who were kind of tall, and I'm like, okay. So I sat down at the front of the bus, and you've all ridden buses before, and it's the evening, and I'm tired, and the bus is kind of, and all of a sudden, this voice from the back of the bus said, Jones, would you step to the back of the bus? Yeah, okay. So I turned, and I didn't walk. I ran to the back of the bus, and I'm like, I'm here, and they said, now, Jones, we need you to close your eyes. I'm like, okay. 12 girls tell you what to do. You listen, okay? I've been married for 28 years. One woman tells you what to do. You listen, okay? And so I closed my eyes, and they said, now, pucker up. I said, now, pucker up a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, I felt this contact with this young lady. And unfortunately, I also felt the rub of braces because the young lady I had just kissed wore braces. Now, the moment only lasted for a nanosecond. But when the kiss was over, I stood up, I walked to the front of the bus, I sat down, and I thought, life is good. And I began envisioning all of the conversations that were going to take place at my little high school of Denton High School of 325 people in grades 9 through 12. And I just knew the next day was going to be a big day for Jones. Well, I walked in that school and down those wooden hallways, much like walking into Lee Hall. And as I started walking down the hall, I started noticing people looking at me, and they were kind of snickering. They were kind of chuckling. They were kind of talking under their breath. And I thought, what's up with that? Oh, they must be talking about what happened last night. Yeah, okay. Well, at about midway through the day, my best friend Jerry came to me, and he says, you know what they're saying? I'm like, no, tell me. That girl said you kiss like a frog. Now, I don't know about you, but in most schools, that's not a good thing to get out, to know that that boy kisses like a frog. Now, I had an opportunity at that moment, because I had failed to say, I could have said, because I'm a bad kisser, I will never kiss again. But is that what I did? No. That's when I started watching certain TV shows a little more closely, okay? When I would go to dances, I wasn't usually dancing, but I could sit and watch what they were doing up in the bleachers. And I'd kind of watch to see where the nose went and how you hold your hands and those kind of things, because I had the goal that I wanted one day for that same girl or another girl to go, wow, what a kisser. Now, how ridiculous would it have been if I had instead chose the path of continuing to find young ladies in my life and go on dates and things. And imagine my senior prom. And I'm taking this young lady to the door to have a McDonald's minute right before we, depart for the evening. And we just about touch our lips. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't kiss you. And she says, why? Well, I had a bad experience kissing once. I would never do that. You would never do that. Why? Because the fear of failure, if used correctly, is a powerful motivator. When things don't go as we wanted them to, we have a choice to use that energy, that emotion, that fear of, wow, I didn't measure up, to go try again, to learn how to do something better. The question is, will we, or will we be ridiculous like I almost was? I don't want to try that again. It didn't go well. Because we know it can go better. The fear of failure is a powerful motivator. Some of you already have been in CDEs today. And some of you already know results. We heard some results tonight. And if you didn't place first, how's that going to affect you? If you didn't make it to this level, how's that going to affect you next year? You say, well, I wasn't real good at it. I'm not going to try again. Or, well, you know what? I do want to do better next year. I want to excel even more than I did this year, because the fear of failure can be a powerful motivator. The other thing about the fear of failure is that the fear of failing at something is a great teacher. And just the whole failure itself can be a tremendous teacher. I talked about it a little bit earlier with that other experience, but just knowing that you get all this information when things don't go well, it can teach us so many different things. I mentioned, you heard in the introduction, I'm a former ag teacher. I tremendously enjoyed my times teaching ag, but I don't think there's any place more that I learned about people's fear of failure and having to learn how to deal with failure to help me become a better teacher. I'll never forget one particular class. I had just finished teaching a unit on dairy cattle, and now I was teaching a unit on beef cattle. And, of course, back in my day, we had the old slide machines, with the little round things. So I'm here, cha-ching, 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 showing these pictures of beef cattle breeds on the screen. And my principal had come down to visit my classroom that day to see how things were going and kind of evaluate me. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I've got great students. They're brilliant. You'll see just how smart they are. And so while we're going through these slides, a picture of an Angus bull came up on the screen. And one of my students raised their hand and said, Mr. Loflin. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so good. He's going to ask some really intelligent question about how large do they get, and, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of this breed versus other breeds. And I was just ready just to show my principal how smart this young man was. The young man raised his hand. Mr. Loflin? I said, yes. He says, how much milk will that bull give? And it gets worse. Because I'm watching this unfold before my eyes, and I'm going, they didn't teach me how to deal with this at NC State University. I don't know how to keep from telling this young man, you're not real bright, okay? And so how do you deal with this failure? And so I learned very quickly that, there's ways around it. And because I saw one of my other students lean over to him, and I thought, oh, this is great. Brett's going to set him straight, and I won't have to say a word. And Brett looked at him and says, it depends on what breed it is. But I learned in that moment, we got to laugh at our failures. Failure is a great teacher. It teaches us to laugh at ourselves and the things that aren't going well. But for some reason, we don't like to laugh at our failures. We get way too serious about them. When we're children, it's not a big problem. We fail, okay, we bounce, we get back up. But as we get older, we don't like to let failure teach us things. In fact, we look around to see if everybody else notices we've made a mistake. I love walking through airports to watch people when they do dumb things. You'd be amazed at the number of people who drop their food on the floor. who drop their suitcase, who leave items behind. And I just kind of stand there and watch this, and sometimes I go, how far should I let them get before I say anything that they left their suitcase? And then it's amazing how then when you call it to their attention, they're so embarrassed, like they've done the worst thing in the world, when the reality is they haven't. Failure is a great teacher if we'll let it teach us things. The other thing that's amazing about failure is that failure helps us discover what our true passions are. You heard my favorite quote by Zig Ziglar, go as far as you can see. When you get there, you can see farther. But you see, failure only comes when we take the step. And then once we take the step, then we can begin to figure out where is it I need to go next. But if we're way back here and we're not willing to take a step forward and look and check things out, then we have no way of knowing what could be out there if we're not willing to fail. Again, you heard it. You heard me mention a moment ago, I'm a parent of two amazing daughters. I mean, I love being a dad. It's probably one of the most, brought more joy to my life than anything almost next to being a spouse that I can think of here on this earth. And I have a daughter who's 22. Alex is a recruiter for the College of Natural Resources at North Carolina State University. So if any of you are considering that a major, then please let me know. I'll put you in touch. The second one is Sydney, my 14-year-old. Now, two very different children. Now, how many of you are different, very different than your brother or sister? Okay, if you've got brothers. Okay, very good. Yes, I understand. And, it's amazing how that happens, isn't it? I mean, I watch my two children and how they have responded to failure. My older daughter, Alex, the oldest one, the older child, she doesn't take failure real well. Now, it's not her fault. It's mine and my wife's fault because she's the first child. She's the one we wrapped in bubble wrap before we sent outside, She's the one that we were so careful about, everything that she ate and all those kinds of things. And so we wanted to make sure that she didn't fail as she came through. And so I've noticed that she's a little afraid to take some steps in the direction she might want to go. Right now she's looking at master's programs. And I keep telling her, Alex, you need to go ahead and start looking at some different ones. She goes, I know, but I just don't know which one. I know what she's saying. Dad, I'm afraid of failure. What if I choose one I don't like? Now, that's Alex, my older daughter. My younger daughter, Sydney, completely opposite. She's that type of young lady who's willing to try anything. I mean, she has so many interests that it's driving me nuts. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. A few months ago, she was talking about. She says, "Dad, I'd love to learn how to do the Rubik's Cube." I'm like, "Okay, fine, we'll buy you a Rubik's Cube. Whatever, $2.45 at Walmart. I don't know." So she's sitting there one night and she's trying to figure out the Rubik's Cube. Okay, and then the next day she's like, "Dad, I think I'd like to learn how to play chess." I'm like, "Okay, sure, I'll teach you how to play chess." And then one day, a couple years ago, she came to me and says, "Dad, I think I kind of like hunting, but I'd like to get into taxidermy." I'm like, "You've got so many interests." And I said, "Sydney, what is it?" She says, "Well, I just like to try new things." Sydney's not afraid of failure. Sydney's not afraid to try new things. And it's amazing what she's creating because her not being afraid to fail. Just this past week, we got a package from a friend of mine in Alaska who heard of Sydney's interest and has sent her some animal pelts from Alaska so that she can do taxidermy on them. And I'm like, how did this happen? Well, it happened because my daughter got to talking to him at an event that we were at, and he so noticed her interest and her excitement in doing this that he's like, "Yeah, Sydney, I'll send you something." And he did. Now, I'm so glad people are sending us things now because when we first started, it was kind of tough. Because the only way you can do taxidermy and get good at it is to practice it. In order to practice it, you got to have specimens. In order to have specimens, you got to find them. Well, for the first year or so, I spent a lot of time on Saturday mornings with a cup of coffee in my small truck driving around southern Davidson County looking for roadkill. Because that was the only way I could find the specimens. The one thing about the fear of failure is that if your child's not afraid of failure, that means you can't be afraid of failure either. And so I'm driving around looking for raccoons and skunks and foxes and all this kind of stuff. And then the funny part is we put them in the freezer at home right next to the food we eat. But that's another story. Y'all come see us anytime you like. But it's amazing to watch Sydney because as a dad and as her mom have learned, let her fail. Because failure helps her find what her passions are. My question to you, do you know your passions? You know what you're really excited about doing? Have you investigated it by some FFA competition or event or activity? Or have you tried it something at your school? Or are you just kind of sitting there going, well, I just don't know. I just don't know, Jones. I'm afraid I might not be good at it. Well, then you got to remember you weren't probably good at kissing either the first time. And then for some of you, it's like, well, I don't know if I want to do this, or this. Well, remember, failure's a great teacher because you might try it, and if you don't like it, it teaches you want to go somewhere else. But what else is it that we can do to overcome our failure and our concern about failure? And maybe this will give you a thought or two. One of the first ones that I always think of is that failure is so much better than regret. Failure is so much better than regret. For some of you who may not know, it's probably most of you, I was a National FFA officer in 1987. I was so afraid that Bill McGrew was going to put a picture of me on the screen. He didn't. Thank you, Bill McGrew. I served on an amazing officer team of 5 other guys who just are incredible mentors to me throughout so much of my life. Well, sadly, one of our members had an aneurysm and passed away a few years ago. And I'll never forget the 5 officers and I sitting together the evening before his funeral. And one of the officers spoke up and said, I wonder what Kevin had regrets about. I'm like, I don't know. So I hope he didn't have any. And then the guy said something I'll never forget. He says, what are you going to do differently, Jones, in case that were to happen to you? That's a heavy question. And I'm sitting here going, come on, Dean. You know, lighten the moment. But he's right. What are you going to do, Jones, so that you don't have any regrets? See, failure is so much better than regrets. Because failure means you tried. Regret means you never tried at all. And while certainly you're at a season of life where my hope and prayer is that the fear of dying is not something that's first and foremost in your mind, but certainly your time is limited. Some of you are juniors, you get one more shot at it. Some of you are sophomores, you got 2. Some of you are freshmen and probably still have 3 or 4 years. Just kidding, okay, just kidding. But our time is limited. What are you going to do so that you don't have any regrets in the FFA or in other things? And finally, as I begin to wind my comments down and get off the stage for all the other amazing things that are going to happen this evening, my other advice to you that you already know, but I'll tell you anyway, that's what dads do, we tell you stuff you already know, is that the way to overcome failure and to deal with failure is to build the right support team. People who will support and encourage you no matter where you are and what you're doing. And you know firsthand that comes from your advisor, comes from your fellow FFA members. Hopefully it comes from your parents and it comes from your brothers and sisters, the people you go to school with. But I've been reminded time and time again in my life just how powerful it is to have that right support team so that I don't have to worry about if I fail, or excuse me, when I fail. And one of the times that I think about the most is an experience with my older daughter, Alex. Several years ago, my daughter, Alex, took up running. Okay, she loves to run. How many of you here like to run? Not if somebody's chasing you. I mean actually for exercise. And they say, okay, so all right. So some of you do. Well, when she started running, I'm like, there ain't no way I'm going with her. Okay? I just think it's one of the most non-productive forms of exercise in the world. Okay? I'd rather cut wood, I'd rather mow grass, I'd rather work in the garden, I'd rather toss hay bales. You know, we don't toss a lot of square hay bales anymore, but I'd rather toss hay bales than to go running. Well, it was okay because my wife, Lisa, was running with her for a while. Notice I said for a while. And then my wife one Christmas pulled her sciatic nerve, wherever that's at, pulled her sciatic nerve, and she had to stop running with my daughter. And so my wife came to me one day and she says, Jones, do you think it's okay for Alex to run by herself? I'm like, sure, honey, it's a town of 1,000 people. You know, if she starts to fall down, somebody will call us before she hits the ground. You know, that's kind of a small town. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And so my wife looks at me, and for those of you who are in a significant relationship, or if you're married, you'll get this. My wife looks at me and she goes, well, I think somebody needs to run with her and keep her safe. And if you're in a significant relationship, when they say somebody, they mean you. Exactly. So I told my daughter, Alex, okay, Alex, we're going to start running. She goes, okay, Dad. I said, how far are we going? She goes, a mile. I'm like, I can do a mile. So we started doing a mile a few times a week. Then she said, hey, Dad, you want to bump it up to a mile and a half? I said, do I have a choice? So we started running a mile and a half. And then pretty soon she announced to me, Dad, I'd like to run a 5K, which is 3-point-whatever miles. She goes, would you do it with me? Well, of course I'm going to do it. I'm her dad. I want to spend time with her. And so I'm like, sure, honey, I'll do it. I probably won't run it that fast, but I'll do it. And so at that point, we ran the 5K, and I was like, wow, this is it. You know, we've done the 5K. Now it's back to the mile and a half or 2 miles. Then she says, Dad, I'd like to run a half marathon. Would you run it with me? I'm like, is your mama better? But by this time, I was loving running with Alex. And I got to tell you that, you know, while I had this tremendous fear of failing in running, I was succeeding at being a better dad because we were hanging out together. And that's huge for a dad with a teenage daughter. And so I was enjoying it enormously. So, of course, I'm going to run this half marathon with her. So I'll never forget in 2008 or 2009, I forget which it was, and we're at the starting line in Hickory, North Carolina. The gun goes off, and we start running. I'm going 13.1 miles. Ain't no way. And so then we got to going up and down hills. And I'm like, oh, this is, and I so wanted to quit so many times. And because I'm thinking, well, I tried. You know, that's how we rationalize sometimes. But then I thought to myself, you know, I'm not out here for me. I'm out here for her. And so I don't want to fail her. And then something interesting happened as we started running. Every few miles, as you're running this half marathon, there'd be these little cheer groups. And one of them might be a little group of Girl Scouts waving little banners going, woo, thanks for coming out today, woo, yay, and all that stuff. And so you kind of run by them, yeah, okay. And then you might get up to another group, and it might be people from the neighborhood who are, you know, got a water hose out there spraying you down as you come by, and they're kind of cheering you on. You're kind of going, oh, this isn't so bad. You know, I think I can do this. And I noticed that every time we'd run through one of these little groups, that my daughter Alex would go, huh, or she'd go, there's another one. I'm like, what's up with this? And so finally, 11-mile mark, we get to the Boys and Girls Club of Hickory, North Carolina. And they're waving purple pom-poms. They got purple shirts on. They got signs on that say one last heel, or holding up signs that say one last heel. They've been saying that for 9 miles, you know, one last heel. And so I'm running through this group, and I'm just feeling like a rock star. And my daughter Alex is trailing a little bit behind me now, and she goes, ah! And so I'd had enough. She's being disrespectful. So I just kind of, I slowed down, and when she got up beside me, I said, Alex, what is your problem? These people are out here supporting us and encouraging us, and every time we pass through one of those groups, you get upset and you say unkind things. She says, Dad, every time you pass through one of those groups, you run faster. Why did I run faster? Because somebody was encouraging me. Somebody was saying, you can do it, Jones. You can make this. Failure's not an option. Oh, sure, you may not complete it, but we're here for you. We're encouraging you. And they didn't just have cheer groups at the end. They had cheer groups throughout the race. So my final thought to you, FFA members, is that if you want to be more successful, how are you going to use the fuel of failure to push you forward? Are you going to allow others to encourage you as you're on the journey? And are you going to take all of these experiences and learn from them so that you can become the person that you want to break through and be? It has been an honor to spend a few minutes with you this evening. Thank you.